All right, so I'm Emily Garza. I'm here today to talk about how employee success creates customer success. So let's just acknowledge it's an employer's market right now. It seems like we can't go more than a week without seeing more news of layoffs, both in the tech industry as well as other industries. And even from personal experience, I recently posted a entry-level CS job position, and within 48 hours, so less than 2 days, I had over 500 applications. That's pretty crazy. It's a competitive market out there. So maybe, whether you admit it or not, you might be thinking, why do I have to focus on employee growth and development right now? But when people leave, it creates disruption, both internally for your team as well as for customers. And if we look at what the signals from the market are telling us, the time to invest in your employees is now. So I did a few polls recently on LinkedIn across my network, and 40% of employees who are currently in jobs right now either are actively looking or plan to look sometime this year. And of those who are actively looking, 60% are looking based on culture or career growth, and 39% of those people are not having career growth conversations with their manager. Even if this is directionally correct, if you take no action, you're going to lose people this year. And this voluntary or unwanted attrition is something that you can be proactive about. So even though employers have the power right now, the employee experience is still critical. And oftentimes in the CS world, we talk a lot about our stakeholder, the customer. But you also have this internal stakeholder, and that's the employee. And I believe that employee success leads to customer success. And think about it from in your shoes. If you're unhappy in your role or you're struggling, you can't be your best professional self. And if you're not your best professional self, that trickles into how you impact and support your customer. And if that feeling is realized, that you're not kind of operating at your best professional self, then you may start to look elsewhere to find where you can capitalize on that. So you may have thought that this talk was going to be really focused on what questions should you be having in this career development discussion, and we'll get to some of that. But that's such a small percentage of really driving this employee engagement and ability to grow within an organization. So we can't start there, because this really starts when they're just a candidate interviewing for your company. So I'm going to start with a framework I think most people know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And Maslow's hierarchy includes physiological, safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. And if you think about it from a business lens, employees are also craving these components. So physiological, am I being paid fairly? Do I have health benefits? Safety, will my job be here in 6 months? Do I trust my team and my manager? Belonging, do I like my coworkers? Do I know what my role should be doing? Esteem, am I getting recognized for my work and efforts? And self-actualization, do I have the chance to learn new skills and continue to grow? And as a default, we tend to think about going straight to the top, esteem and self-actualization. And we do this through career discussions. It's what people ask for. It's probably what we've seen in our career. But doing that creates a challenge for 2 reasons. First, people associate a change in job title with the only growth that's available. And second, it ignores the importance of other factors that impact your job happiness. For example, you can have a really great title, but if you're scared every time a manager puts a one-on-one on your calendar, you're not going to operate your best. So let's go back to this hierarchy so that we can talk about building a strong foundation that creates both employee success that can lead to growth. So we'll start with physiological, and I'm going to use the example here of fair pay. And this is fair pay compared to the industry, right? You've probably seen multiple customer success platforms put out industry surveys to kind of gather information about salaries and pay to create some transparency. And that's great. But it's also fair pay internally. So think about an example. Maybe you have CSMs and salespeople collaborating on upsells. What's the comp structure for both of those roles related to the upsell motion? Is it actually commensurate with the level of effort being put in for each of the roles? And another example, even within the CS team specifically, is when you're hiring people in different economic climates. Sometimes there are conditions that require maybe higher salary ranges than previous, and making sure that people don't get kind of creating a big disparity between those roles. Second is safety. And you really need to be able to acknowledge when times are tough. So I'll do a quick poll by show of hands to the audience. How many of you have addressed the current economic climate directly with your team? Okay, smattering of hands. If you haven't, I would take a guess that there's probably at least a hint of a rumor going around. Just with all of the climate, people, if you aren't addressing things directionally, rumors start. And so I would encourage you to do that. And you have to give people feedback on where they are to create this idea of job security. I know first-time managers especially sometimes have a hard time giving this critical feedback. I'll give you an example here. I was mentoring a first-time manager, and he came to me and said, I have a person on my team that I'm trying to decide if I put them on a performance improvement plan or just manage them out of the business. And I asked what I thought was a simple question: are they going to be surprised? And he couldn't answer me. That's really bad. If you aren't giving people kind of feedback and an ongoing touch point on where they are and if there are gaps, it really doesn't lead them to success. And it also creates this break in safety, not only for this individual person, but for the ripple effect across the team, if you were actually to let them go without a lot of feedback. I think the second piece here related to safety is trust in team and manager. And as a manager, you have the ability to create a safe environment. And that really stems from kind of the words that you say and then how you actually take action to support those. So I'll give you a personal example here. I was 2 months into my new job, and I had an established career discussion on the calendar with one of my employees. And I'm coming in really excited to talk about how she's going to grow and develop her career, all the skills that she wants to work on. And she comes to me and says, I was planning on coming to this meeting and giving my 2-week notice. She said, I'm really burned out. I need some time and space. And I understand. Over the last year, this team has been through a lot. They had a change in their role definition, a change in their comp plan. They didn't have a manager for multiple months. Like all of the factors all at once that lead to kind of burnout and employee dissatisfaction. But the fact that she came to me and was willing to open this conversation was so powerful, because it meant that she trusted me both in the moment to have this conversation, which is a hard conversation for an employee to bring up. It's not a great conversation for a manager either, but it's really hard for the employee, as well as trust in kind of the longer term, right? The ability that I was going to be able to impact both the team and overall company direction. So because we were able to have this conversation, instead of her actually giving her 2 weeks notice and leaving the company, we were able to come to an agreement where she would take a leave of absence, have a little bit of time for herself, and be able to come back. Because at the end of the day, she's a great employee who already understands our product and our customers, and now she can come back and I can have, kind of give her the space that she needs and have someone come back who's ready to go. So you spend a lot of time at work, and whether you're introverted or extroverted, customer success is a social role. You have to do your work with people and through other teams. And the team that you work with makes a big difference. So it's really important to set that team mission and really develop the culture of the team, because culture develops whether it's intentional or not. So you want to be really thoughtful about making it intentional. And I'll give you an example here. So I am very passionate about feedback, as you'll probably tell throughout this presentation. And so whenever I join a new team, I introduce this idea, and I explain the fact that I'm really passionate about it, how I expect it to look. I think that feedback should be kind of always, right? I want to be able to give feedback to my team. I want my team to give feedback to me. And I want us to give feedback across peers and to cross-functional teams as well. And so by establishing that that's a feedback culture, It helps the team understand the direction that I'm going to go in. But culture isn't created through a single conversation. So then I have to take action and actually display that. So whenever I sit on calls with my CSMs, afterwards I sit down and give them feedback, both what they did well as things I think that they could improve on for the next time. And even from a team aspect, when I have a new employee join the team, in team meetings, I will have them give mini demos to the rest of the team members. And some of this is making sure that they're learning and practicing, but it's also a reinforcement for feedback, because once they do their presentation, I ask the rest of the team members to provide them feedback. And so this reinforces a loop early on for the new employee that we are a feedback culture, as well as for the rest of the team that we're all learning and growing together. And customer success is the front line to our customers, but we all know that it takes a village. So as a manager, your role is really to break down silos and create that framework for mutually beneficial conversations and collaborations, whether that be the sales team, the product team, marketing, finance. Similar to how culture develops, whether you are intentional or not, this cross-functional work has to happen whether you're intentional or not. So as a manager, you should really be thinking about how you can build a proactive standard for more thoughtful social interaction. And this will help the teams kind of minimize friction and be able to better work together. And people want to feel important. They want to feel like their job matters. And I'm not advocating for overinflating titles. I think that happens a lot in startups already anyway. But I do think it's important to be clear about responsibilities and then recognize people for meeting those responsibilities. A personal example here, where I did very poorly at this was a few companies ago, and the teams were growing, and I needed to split a team into two. And we gave them generic names, Premier and Signature. All of them were managing enterprise customers, and one team ended up with a few more senior people. And as we were breaking down the accounts, some of the larger accounts got allocated to that more senior team. And even though it wasn't intentional, I got feedback from the other team that they didn't feel like they were going to have the same opportunities and exposure given the accounts that they had gotten allocated. And that wasn't my intention. Everyone had the same job title, they were in the same pay band, we were seeing them as equal. But perception is reality. And so I actually needed to go and then make a change on how we were allocating accounts so that they felt like they had that opportunity and that they were really bought in on their role in the company moving forward. So let me go back out to the audience here. I'd love to hear in 1 or 2 sentences who can share their most recent CS win. All right.
So this help. So I'm in email marketing with Klaviyo. So I do email marketing for Klaviyo, and so we have one of our customers who's in called a GrowthWorks project with Procter & Gamble, and so I help sell them on SMS. So we're not only going to have them on email, but also winning them from attentive to SMS. And this deal is actually going to help us get a whole lot of the other Procter & Gamble brands to SMS with us as well.
Wonderful. Let's do a round of applause. That's great. So I noticed there that not a lot of hands shot up. And I don't think that customer success celebrates enough. And if you think about it, celebrating is not a zero-sum game. Sales, great at celebrating, and, right? Like, no one's going to deny that. Customer success should be good at it as well. And I feel like what I tend to hear from peers is, I don't know what to celebrate, or is this renewal big enough to celebrate? You've got renewals, you've got customer advocacy stories, you've got upsell opportunities, you've got customer win-back stories. There's lots of things to celebrate. And I'm not advocating that you should start doing participation trophies for everything that your team does. But I do think that celebrating within your organization and across your company is important, both to specifically recognize the people who are doing the action, as well as to build your team credibility internally and show the value of customer success back to your company. So, have you ever asked anyone what motivates them? I have multiple times. And almost always, I get either a blank stare or pay, right? Because that's the answer that everybody knows. And oftentimes people haven't been asked that question or haven't been guided through that question, and so they don't kind of know what the options are, and that's why you kind of get the answers that you do. So if you truly care about understanding your team and their motivations and the ability to help them grow, you need to be thoughtful on how you approach the conversation, because basic questions will lead to basic answers. And maybe the answer is title or money, but it's not the only thing, and especially if that's not what you have to give right now, right? Budgets might be tight, they may not be ready for that next promotion. Understanding what other levers that you can pull is really important. So I've used these career driver cards from Bridge. It's an LMS company. I haven't worked there, but they're a free resource that I really like. And going through this exercise has been really helpful for me because it provides words that people may have, kind of deep in their heart, but don't know how to vocalize, of things that may be a motivation for them. So I've done this at a couple of companies, and it's really helped seeing them talk through the exercise and understand what are those other factors that are important to them for their job happiness. So now, if we look at the framework in totality, you can see that investing into each of these areas thoughtfully creates an environment where employees can do their best work. And when employees are doing their best work, they better support their customers, and it gives the employee a chance to both shine and grow. So if you've built this culture where the underlying framework is that employee success drives customer success, how does this translate into employee retention and growth? So let's use another framework, the customer life cycle. So I think everyone's seen the customer life cycle. We start with marketing, creating awareness. We then do demos, discovery. We learn more about the customer and share more about our company. Once they've signed, you then onboard them, hopefully getting the ability to prove value, and then retaining and growing the customer. Similarly, we have the employee life cycle. So you're creating a job description, marketing that out to get interested candidates. You're doing the interview, information sharing back and forth. And then you're onboarding, providing value, both to the end customer that the CSM is supporting, as well as value to the company and the employee, with the ultimate intention to retain and grow them. But where do you need to start? So I think that you have to start with competencies. And according to Indeed.com, competencies are a set of demonstrable proficiencies and abilities that individuals use to achieve a goal or complete a task. Generally, for me, I think about competencies as the core skills needed to effectively do your job. And when we think about a customer success manager, there's really two sources of evaluation for success. The first is numerically measurable KPIs, so maybe gross revenue retention or net revenue retention, as well as competencies, so the things that will allow the CSM to actually hit these numerical goals. And if you're thinking about it from a customer lens, you may be thinking about an ideal customer profile. Who's the right fit to come in and be successful with our tool? Similarly, you can think about the competencies as an ideal employee profile. Who's going to come in and be able to flourish against the goals that we have set? And I don't think that there's a kind of single list for competencies for a customer success role. The role is still too varied across companies and across industries, but two non-negotiables that I've seen and have carried with me across 3 companies now are these two, ownership and curiosity. So step 1 is really to outline these competencies, and I've shared here 2 different lists that I've used at various companies. And then what you need to do after you've established these competencies is to build them out across the employee life cycle. So phase 1 is the candidate phase of the life cycle, and your core tools here are both the job description and the interview process. And within the job description, you can either directly call out the competencies in a bulleted list, or like in this example, you can add them in to the overall written component. And really the ultimate goal here is that the candidate's first interaction with your company helps give them a sense of how they're going to be evaluated, which really impacts that idea of safety. And this is really the beginning of the foundation for career conversations. So then we move to the interview process. And I've worked at some small startups, and oftentimes startups do interviews without a whole lot of structure. People are tagged in at the last minute without a lot of context or guidance, and it creates a lack of consistency as well as the opportunity for bias in the interview process. And this might mean, as a hiring manager, you don't get the insight that you need in order to make an informed hiring decision. So instead of saying, HR said we need 3 interviews, so let's set 3 up, think about how you can leverage the competencies to really drive and understand the key attributes in order to get someone perfect for the role. And by leveraging the competencies and outlining specific interview questions and guidance, it allows all interview panelists to more accurately represent what the employee experience will be, which impacts that idea of safety and esteem. So now once you've gotten a prospective candidate, you've offered them the job, now they are becoming an employee, and you're moving into the onboarding phase. And this is where guidance and expectations start to become critical. So how can you make someone feel safe and adapt to this new social group that they're part of? I think there's kind of 3 areas that I'd like to cover related to that. First is being clear on goals and evaluation. So setting up weekly goals and measurement as they're joining and going through this onboarding process. And this is both the activities that they are doing, right? Please just don't give them a list of 20 gong meetings to listen to without any guidance, because they don't know what they're supposed to be taking out of it. So being a lot more prescriptive on what they should be doing and what they should be observing related to that. And then you also need to help showcase interactions. So especially with the more remote culture that we're working in, it may be hard to understand who to reach out to for what, or what meetings to leverage for various purposes. So being really clear and providing employees this guidance is important. And the second thing is assigning an onboarding buddy. I think most people and most companies do this today, but I think that there's a big gap in how effectively we're doing this. I'll give a personal example here. In my first kind of management job, I started assigning new team members buddies, but I wouldn't give a whole lot of guidance. So I'd say, you're somebody that I trust on the team, you know our tool, you know our process, teach this new person. And the first couple of weeks is easy, right? The new person's a blank slate. And so you're teaching them about the product and whatever else. But the further along that you go, what I started to see is that these buddies or mentors would start to get into like very nitty-gritty things that were important in their own book of business, but may not be relatable to this new hire's book of business. It may not even be the right timing to introduce some of those concepts. So it was creating a very different onboarding experience for each new hire based on the buddy that they were assigned. And if you think about it from a customer success perspective, we're already doing this with our customers, right? We're providing a more structured onboarding. We're providing goals and milestones and check-ins. And so we need to be a lot more intentional about giving that guidance internally to our new employees as well. And then the third aspect is holding on account introductions. And this is huge for safety. Typically, I like to allow somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks before I introduce an employee to any of their accounts, really to give them time to learn about our product and make sure that they feel comfortable with some of those aspects. And from a customer perspective, if you get introduced to a CSM who doesn't yet know their tool, doesn't know who to go to for questions, doesn't know anything about the industry, it's not inspiring. And it really kind of starts to create a lack of trust. And from the employee perspective, this is terrifying, right? You're asked to go build this long-term customer relationship, be a product expert, and you might not even know how to do a demo yet. So just wait. Maybe it's 2 to 4 more weeks of interim coverage, but it will create a much better both employee and customer experience. So while CSMs need to focus on providing value to the customer, for today, I'm just going to interpret value as how you can provide value back to the employee. So by a show of hands, who is comfortable giving direct coaching feedback? Okay, great. How many of you had to learn how to do that? Okay. Me as well. And a Harvard Business Review study showed that over a third of managers have a hard time giving direct feedback, especially if they expect the employee to react negatively to that, because it's hard. Even when you know it's the right thing to do, it can still be a difficult conversation. And I think two things that have really helped me in the idea of framing feedback is the fact that it's a disservice not to do that. So this employee is looking for growth and development feedback. It's really your responsibility as a manager to help provide that, and withholding that information actually hurts the employee. And the second aspect is that it doesn't have to take that long. I think sometimes we conflate giving feedback with sitting down and doing a 30 or 60-minute performance review. It can be a minute. As long as you have the expectations set up already and those competencies, you can tie back to that. So I'll give you an example here where I had a first-time manager who was giving feedback to an employee about things that he can improve upon. And every time he said, yep, understand, I'll do better next time. Except he wasn't doing better next time. And so we brainstormed and came up with kind of two steps that she needed to do. First, she needed to provide the feedback in relation to the competencies. So being able to say, this is the expectation for the role, this is the action that we're seeing, and here's the gap. And then second, we actually had the employee repeat back to her, because sometimes people aren't specifically trying to ignore the feedback that you're giving, but maybe they're hearing it differently or not absorbing it. So by having him repeat back, we could understand where the gap in understanding was and actually target that. You also need to provide feedback consistently, because consistent feedback helps people feel safe, because it gives them the opportunity to change. They know what they're doing well, and they know what they need to improve. And ongoing feedback hits a lot of Maslow's key tiers. So by pointing out via competencies, you're reinforcing the key structure of the role, which helps with belonging and safety. If you know the role expectations, then you can be recognized when you positively hit those. That ties to esteem. And getting ongoing feedback helps you learn, grow, and develop, which ties to self-actualization. So now we've finally reached the point where we can talk about retaining and growing employees, the career conversations. But with the framework that we've built, it's no longer a conversation about, are you ready for your next title promotion? So let's get tactical here. There's kind of 5 key areas that I want to talk about related to these development conversations. So first, you need to set up quarterly development conversations, so specific time. Feedback should be ongoing, either directly after calls or in weekly one-on-ones, but you can't have a development conversation crammed into a one-on-one. It's almost always the thing that gets bumped off the agenda for the next time. So you need specific time carved out for that. The second thing is you need to ask the right questions when you're in this meeting. And I've provided a few examples here. But think about it from a customer lifecycle lens. You're doing discovery, and you can't provide a plan to a customer if you don't have an understanding of their needs and interests. Similarly with your employees, you have to do discovery, understand where they're interested, where their skills are, in order to help craft a plan together. And then as a manager, you have to understand your options. So this means doing prep work before going into the development conversation. So understanding how you may be able to best support your employee. Maybe that's creating mentor paths, either with people internally or through other people in your network. Maybe that's offering them opportunities to work on cross-functional projects, or set up ability to shadow other teams or other roles. Maybe that's building out career ladders for your team. So you have kind of a junior and senior level, or a 1, 2, 3 level. And maybe it's even creating a new job for a person who has a really specific skill set and can fill a gap that your organization needs. And then you need to work with the employee to actually create these goals. And as a manager, it's your responsibility to help craft that framework to get them where they want to go. But you also have to be realistic and set the right expectations on where the skill gaps may be and some of the work that they might need to put in order to move to that next step. And then finally, you need to understand your role. So if an employee is doing well within their role, then It's your job as a manager to advocate for them and to make sure that that goodness is not just staying within your team. And then you also need to give them opportunities to shine, right? Once you understand their motivations and kind of their skills and you put together this plan, giving them these opportunities, maybe it's to lead a cross-functional project or develop a new process for the team. A CEO that I used to report to, I think, positioned it really well. There's probably something in your role as a manager today that you're doing that's boring. It's routine. You've done it a million times. You got to do this report weekly. But for somebody else, that's a cool new opportunity. It's building new skills that they haven't had exposure to before. Maybe it gives them exposure to other teams that they haven't worked with. So don't be afraid to delegate some of these opportunities to help develop skills on your team. So while you leverage all of these components for a career conversation, it takes longer than just putting time on the calendar, but it's also much more worth it for an impactful conversation. So we covered a lot of information in our time together today, so let's do a quick recap. Employee sentiment is important both for their own engagement as well as for driving customer experience. And we used Maslow's hierarchy and applied it to the customer experience of how we can build from physiological, safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. And then we talked about the customer life cycle and the employee life cycle. And similar to the customer life cycle, this needs to be a cohesive approach, leveraging competencies to drive alignment throughout all of the steps that an employee goes through. And I'll acknowledge, I think a lot of this seems like table stakes. But what I'm willing to guess is that you're not capitalizing on all of it. So my challenge to you today is find something that resonated, maybe a gap that you're currently not doing, or take these frameworks back and think about applying them to your own organization, and then go address them to create a more employee-aware culture. Because doing this will allow your employees to shine, which will open up more career development opportunities than just having a single career discussion. Thank you.